Stephen, you're not a political person. As you said, you don't know the difference at this point between the UDR, the UVF.
UDA, it doesn't matter. No, I didn't know that.
That stuff isn't. It's you're a young musician, and that's you're living a totally different world than that. But obviously, over the passage of time, what had happened that night and who was involved, that does start to become clear. And like, to explain to people who don't know at this stage, the UDR are the Ulster Defence Regiment. Yeah. So they are a legal body, I suppose. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They are, I suppose, a militia. Would that be fair to describe them as something like that?
They're part of the British Army.
They're part of the
largest regiment in the British Army.
They are. But it's mostly populated with basically locals. Yeah. And they're kind of armed and given some sort of structure by the British Army. Yeah. But they're effectively, locals are given guns and given license to trained. So it's a militia. Like, I mean, it's it's not a normal part of any sort of way normal states operate. But obviously that is what was happening at the time. The UVF are a terrorist organisation. Even then, they're a terrorist organisation. The UDA, of course, would be a similar militia that only become proscribed at a later point. Okay. And then you have the British Army, who are also in the north at the time. Yeah. So you have this collection of a terrorist organisation, an organisation that's an armed force that's really very little oversight, and then you have the British forces, and then you also have more shadowy elements of the British forces. And really, you spoke about Robin Jackson, known as the Jackal. And, he, even in the history of the Troubles, there's a few names that stand out that are, their behaviour is particularly psychopathic. I think Robin Jackson, he'd ultimately died of cancer, but he's linked to up to 50, the deaths of up to 50 people.
Up to 125. Possibly 125 this part.
And, he's a UVF man. So all of this, you've no knowledge of it. But over time, this comes out because, and it's come out really, really slowly, in fairness. Some of it is straight away. There's 2 UVF guys have been killed, the bomb makers, and they're probably identified relatively quickly as members of the UVF. The role of everybody else certainly isn't clear. What do we know now, Stephen, I suppose, all of these years later? And how do we come to know that? And I know that's a huge question, and there's been obviously hugely successful Netflix documentaries going into all of that. So I know we're summarising some of this, but what do we know?
Yeah, well, somebody like the people who made the Netflix documentary, they don't presume, or they don't, they work on the records that are available.
Yes.
They're really, really good at going through the archives, and there are some great archivists in the north, particularly Ciarán McArt.
Yeah.
And Justice for the Forgotten had done a lot of research. Patrick Nukin Centre had done. Various groups like that, Relatives for Justice. But the HET was set up, the Historical Inquiries team was set up. Now, I must say that, between 1975 and 2005, I was in denial.
Yeah.
I did not want to know about conspiracy theories. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to complicate this. I thought to myself, this is a bunch of thugs that came together, and they were, and they decided to do this collusion. I didn't want to know about that, because it was only going to make the whole thing more complicated for me.
Yeah.
As far as I was concerned, and people would say, what happened? I say, well, we went to a gig on the way back. We were stopped, we were attacked. 3 of the lads died. I didn't die. I was injured, but I'm back on the horse again. So I'm fine. And that helped me sort of, progress and to try to get, but, that's kidding yourself. That you're in denial. So when we eventually, I was the first to leave the band.
Yeah.
because it was reminding me and it was reminding the audience and all that. See, Ireland did not know how to deal with us.
No.
Either officialdom or the ordinary, the audiences.
In what ways, Stephen? They didn't know how to marry the tragedy to the music, I suppose.
Well, I suppose the best thing to do is you compare it with what would have happened today.
Yeah.
First of all, there was no counselling. We never got counselling.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't happen today that while somebody is still in the hospital bed, that you're talking about going back on the road and getting new lads into the band. But that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I was 100% for this. I thought, you know what, this will fade from the public discourse. I'll get better. I'll be part of a new band. We'll put new guys and we'll get on with it. And the most important thing is we'll get our lives back.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. So you've got this strange situation. First of all, that you've got these three, because Ray, I say, was just as much a victim, because although he had gone home, I mean, psychological damage was terrible. Survivor's guilt with him is terrible. But you've got these three severely traumatized, acute chronic PTSD in a band.
Yeah.
So you've got, three other guys, and these fellas are supposed to be entertainers. Clap your hands, stamp your feet, within a couple of months. So we were back in rehearsing in October. So that sounds, it wouldn't happen today, would it?
It wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't. But you can understand it as you describe it there, because this is what you know. This is
your life back.
You have families, presumably, that you have to support.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to be supporting them when you're not gigging, I presume.
The other side of it, Niall, is the people in the country didn't know how to handle it.
No.
And I suppose it sounds flippant, but at the time I said, somebody asked me, what, how's it going? I said, the people before, that happened, they were all up and wanting an autograph, and there wasn't selfies at the time, but there's still cameras, and things like that, and it was great. But after that, the people didn't know whether I said the people don't know whether to shake your hand, ask for an autograph, or genuflect.
Yeah,
like we were a whole new entity, and so were they, not just us. So I suppose what I'm saying is, the whole country was traumatized.
Yeah. Because
we were like family to them. It's not, you could take, for instance, the greatest loss of life in any single day was the Dublin Monaghan bombings, right? But you ask somebody today, go out on the street now, so even people, contemporaries, people who were alive then, and grown-ups then, ask them to name 2 or 3 of the people in the Dublin Monaghan. They won't.
No.
Because they've become known. It's become a cliche. They've become known as the event. So this is something that I address in the book. The fact that when I wrote the bass player, I said, this was my survivor's guilt. That when I said, we have a platform, because we were known before it happened, everybody could tell you our names, all of the young people around the country who would have been on Spotlight or Spotlight magazine, all that, on the papers, and then on the Evening Herald with the music paper pages and all that, also on the television, and Fran was a pop idol and all that kind of business. So to kill him and to kill the lads and to kill anybody in Miami was like a death in the family. So you had an entire country that was traumatized, entire country that was like, it was never addressed, and there wasn't a discussion about it. And of course, when we went back in the road, it was filmed. It was, isn't this wonderful?
Yeah.
Now, on the surface, you say, of course it's wonderful. Look at the lads; they're back there and they're smiling. And can you imagine what was underneath those smiles? But no, I'm not saying that we knew or that we were putting on an act. We weren't. We actually thought, this is great. And when you talk about, we talk about survivor's guilt. Ray Miller has it. I don't have that kind of survivor's guilt. I'm not sorry I didn't die.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't die. I'm sorry the lads were killed. And so I don't have that kind of survivor's guilt. But what I do have, even today, now I've been through, various psychiatric assessments and counselling and things like that, simply because of the court case that went on since 2011 to 2012. But survivor's guilt for me today, at this present moment, is that I go home tonight and I turn on the television and I watch children being blown all over the place and body parts of kids in Palestine and Gaza. And nobody knows their name, but everybody knows our name.
Yeah.
And now I shouldn't be complaining because we had a concert last night and, everybody wants a selfie with you. Everybody wants to, and you're a great man and all this kind of business. Well, I'm not. All I did was what you do. You live.
Yeah.
And, but nobody knows these kids' names. So I look at that and it has a terrible effect. I know what the smell, we watch it in, sort of this one-dimensional thing on television or whatever, and we see somebody cradling a child or the blood seeping through a shroud or something like that. Nobody knows their name. And yet here we were last night and everybody knew who we were. That to me makes me feel guilty.
Because obviously, like in some ways, because these things, we receive these on TV, like in Gaza, their trauma is going to be the same as yours, but yours is, at least, I suppose, there's a public acknowledgement of
That's the very word.
Yeah.
I tell you what, that's the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Because what people, there's a lot of talk about striving for truth and justice, and of course, it has to be there. This obscene legacy bill that came out, it's like an insult to humanity, to deny them access to the courts. But the word you use there is the most important word. Before truth and justice, I know from working with Truth and Reconciliation Platform, it's acknowledgement.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement that they suffered, because, and that may not seem like a big deal, but it is, because if you're ignored and if you feel that, if somebody says to you, I'm really sorry for your troubles, I'm really sorry you lost your brother, I'm really sorry you lost your legs in the bomb of the Abercar, and if you're talking to somebody, like Jennifer McNairn or her sister Roslyn, it's like these two young women out shopping for a wedding dress. The bomb goes off in the Abercorn where they went in for a cup of coffee. Jennifer lost both her legs. Her sister lost both her legs, an arm and an eye. Now, if you ignore people like that, and you must say this was a terrible thing, and you must talk to these people, and you must say this is terrible. But for so long, there were so many of these people just go unacknowledged. Now, Jennifer's case and Rosalind's case, people know them. They know Michael Gallagher from Roma. They know the people that were murdered in Bloody Sunday, and my friends from Ballymurphy. I know all of those people. But even in Britain, the Birmingham pub bombing victims, Julie Hambleton's 21 people murdered. Their own government denies them the right to go into court. We think that this legacy bill that's been brought in by the Tories, it just affects us. It doesn't. They're also denied access.
Yeah, and of course, the legacy bill, for people who won't be aware of the ins and outs of it, it was brought in by Boris Johnson. In part, at least, I think, or how he sold it was to stop British soldiers being prosecuted for historical crimes. But it was resisted by everybody in the North, all groups from all sides who it wasn't, there was cross-community support against it, because the legacy, as you said, the legacy affects everybody, and people want at least to hear the truth and also want to hear, want that acknowledgement. So nobody wanted it, effectively.
Go back to the beginning of what you just said there now. That they say that these vexatious claims taken against the security forces. That's not true.
No.
Look at the stats. But here's the thing. I remember I met some the Troubles, they're called the Northern Ireland Committee, that was from Westminster. I met that committee. It was led by a fellow called Sir Robert Buckland. Now, you could talk to that guy. He was sitting opposite us. We had a meeting with him. And there was a guy beside, I can't remember his name, but he was another MP. And I mean, talk about an idiot. This man was, it was ridiculous,
Yeah.
And you could see him trying to sell this thing. At least Robert Buckland was trying to do it sort of smile at you while he's trying to do you harm. But this other idiot was there, an MP, and he was selling what you just said, vexatious claims and a witch hunt against the security forces. So I asked him, I said, look, forget about the North. Forget about the North or there. Tell me, I said, is there a witch hunt against the security forces in Birmingham? And he said, of course not. I said, well, why are the Birmingham pub bombing victims being denied access to the courts?
Yeah.
And he didn't have an answer to that. So that's one thing. I also met Secretary of State, the current Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Hilary Benn. Met him in official capacity in the British Embassy here in Dublin. And of course, they come in, hail fellow, well met. Everybody's, call me Hilary and all this. I knew his father. He wrote to me a couple of times.
Yeah.
Tony Benn, good man.
Famous, very well-known, very left-wing, very powerful speaker, Tony Benn.
Yeah. Now, Hilary Benn was there, and he was talking to he was trying to sell this ICRIR, which is the information retrieval thing that they're trying to bring in to convince people that, you don't have to go to court now. All you have to do is just sign up to this information retrieval thing, and we'll give you all of the information that you need, that you're looking for truth about what happened to your loved ones. So I see the ICRIR as a nonsense, especially because given who's in charge of it, but so I said to him, I was sitting beside him. There was about 6 or 7 of us at the table, and I said, somebody just said, I said, will the ICRIR officers who are going to give the people the truth, according to you, will they have access to information that's currently hidden behind PII? There's this public interest immunity search, which means that you can close down a file for 80 years or 100 years. I said, will they have access to that? Because if somebody asks you a question that's currently hidden, if a victim asks, what happened to my loved one, and I can't find out because it's currently hidden behind a PII, will they have access to that and give them that information? He looked at me as if I had two heads. He said, of course not.
Yeah.
So I said, how can you possibly tell these people this is just not true, that you can give them the truth they're looking for, and yet tell them that you're not able to look, that the person giving the truth is not able to look at it behind a PII.
So, Stephen, your knowledge of all of this now is immense, obviously. But how did you get to that point where you are meeting MPs, all of this stuff, and you have such an extensive knowledge? Because obviously you go back on the road and you don't have this, and you don't want to know this.
Yeah.
But obviously things changed over your life.
Yeah.
How did that change come about? Like when did you start to feel or did you feel, I need to know more, I need to go back to this? How did that happen, I suppose?
When I started to engage with the Barn Tribunal, this would be in the early 2000s.
Yeah. So
Barn was they were looking into the, what happened in the North and Judge Barn, I was asked to go, and it was the first time that I gave evidence.
What age are you at this point in your life?
2005, 2004, 2005, whatever. And that particular meeting was set up about, I said, we were moving back from London. We had bought a house in London. We were going to move back because our daughter was at school age. So we said we wanted to grow up with her relatives,
Yeah.
And so at that time, I was asked, would you engage with the Barn Tribunal? Just tell them what happened, tell them, your memories. And I did. And then I began to look at evidence, because, you want to be prepared to give the answers. And my preparation was geared towards, I want to just make sure that this man knows I don't believe in the collusion thing. I don't believe in any of this. But when I saw the evidence, and I saw some of it from Justice for the God, it was clear. I mean, there was just no way that I could espouse this. There was just no way that I could say there wasn't collusion. I just saw it. It was there. when I went into court with the Crozier and McDowell thing, I was given evidence of that. And yeah, I remember being told when I said, will I mention the British officer who took charge?
Yeah.
I was told at that stage by both the defence and prosecution lawyers, that's not important. So I said, well, it mustn't be important. I think, well, maybe, there was enough. Maybe there was a soldier there in charge at every one of these blocks that he would have been. But no, I know, obviously, that they've been hiding that. The fact that they, now the name that kept coming up all the time was Robert Nyrek. That name was thrown into the mix from an early stage. I was never able to identify the soldier, even though I was shown pictures of Nyrek. I was never able to identify the officer who took charge. In fact, I said at the time that I thought that the man's hair under the berry was fair hair. Now, I have to admit afterwards, and I do in the book, that the light that I was going was only the interior light from the van, and also the fact that there was only a half moon there from, so I could have been wrong about the hair.
And of course, Des has feels it was Robert Nyrek.
Yeah.
And Robert Nyrek, for people who don't know, he was a British intelligence officer who'd come over. He was based in the north. Ultimately, he was abducted and believed to have been shot by Republicans, at least, almost definitely by the IRA. So Stephen, just to explain the collusion, what is the essence of it that has come out? And I know that's really complicated to ask.
Well, I have to sort of expand on the Nyrek thing because as you know, the mitigating circumstances for me here is that when I sat in the court looking at Crozier and McDowell, who were convicted for that, and one of them spilled the beans altogether. Crozier absolutely, told everybody he was terrified. But I couldn't identify them, although they were there, and one of them apparently was the one with the notebook and going around. So I'm looking at these guys in the dock.
Yeah.
I couldn't identify them.
Which is totally normal, by the way. People think that something like a face is burned onto your...
Yeah.
But of course, it doesn't happen, and anybody who sits through court cases will say, people who are witnesses to stuff, they'll say, "Oh, I think he was 6 foot," and of course he's 5'4". It's just the way human memory works, isn't it?
In my case, I've been told by psychologists, psychiatrists, that because of the condition our lads were in, that I have blocked out all faces from that.
Yeah,
so that was one thing. But the sinister thing you asked me there earlier. What have we learned? Although I was never able to identify it, during the course of specific discovery, when we were taking the court case against the Chief Constable of the PSNI and the MOD, we were given a document.
Yeah.
And the document is, it's a statement by a serving soldier, by a serving officer. We know very well, a man of great integrity. And that statement says that Robert Nyrek was responsible, that Robert Nyrek was involved in the planning and execution of the Miami Showband massacre. So, much as I was able to say, that I can't identify him no more than I could identify the two fellows who were found guilty standing in front of me in the dock, I saw this document. So, and it exists.
Yeah.
We have it. So here's the important thing about that. When our case was settled under duress, there was I wrote to the courts. And first of all, I asked my solicitor because he had shown me that document, so I knew he had it. There was a lot of other documents there as well. So I said, "Can I have the documents? Because I'm looking at writing a book. I'm looking at filling in the gaps that we did, from the first book in 2007. That's the way I thought I was going to write it. It didn't turn out like that. But when I got in touch, he said, well, we'll have to go to the courts to get permission for you to get the documents. And I thought that's a bit strange, because there are documents. We were given those by the MOD and the PSNI and part of discovery. So there are documents. So I took it on myself. I wrote to the courts myself. And I said, can I have the documents? And within 24 hours, I got a message back, an email back. I said, of course you can. Your solicitor has them. Go and get them. So I forwarded on that email to my solicitor. Now he's not. I have a new solicitor now. Kevin Winter's a great man, but I sent this on, and I didn't receive a reply. But what happened about 2 days afterwards was that I got an email from the court services who told me go and get them, who are now telling me that if I wanted them, I would have to sign an NDA, this non-disclosure agreement. So we find ourselves, and I did, and I went through, I read every one of about, I'd say it must have been up against 17,000 files. Some of them were redacted.
Yeah.
I spent couple of Christmases ago, reading every one of those things. So that's in a way answering you. There was a time when I wasn't interested in, and then I became totally focused on this. So it makes you sort of expert. But I went through them, got the document, and now our new solicitor has our documents. So we now find ourselves in a position where you've got the likes of RTE Primetime, who brought out a program which effectively canonized Nairac, because they had this fella who was also a serving spook, and he had now become a priest, an Anglican priest. And they're basically saying this fellow was away fishing.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. He must have been fishing with night sights on him or something like that. But that's what they say, he's fishing. So we said, whatever it is, it's in the public interest, to show that to counteract what RTE Primetime did, because they never consulted any of the victims. And there's lots and lots of people in the north who say that they saw Nairac in various stages, and obviously the killing at the 3 steps. All of these things that need to be addressed. I'm not saying it was him, but there's a document, an official MOD document puts him there. So we now want to have the NDA lifted, the non-disclosure agreement lifted. We're currently in front of the courts trying to get the court service to say, okay, lift that you can actually publish this document. And the prevarication and the delays that it's what they do, deny, delay, and death. So at one stage, they were keep coming back to us. Oh, well, sorry for the delay, but we're still looking into this. And then we got this ridiculous thing that said, unfortunately, we can't find the document. So we wrote back and said, no problem, we'll send it to you. Should we have it? You gave it to us.
Yeah.
How daft is that? No reply from them.
And look, I mean, some of that experience is mimicked over other investigations. For example, the investigation into Steak Knife and various other investigations.
Steak Knife is a huge gaslighting exercise, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
What you're told about that, you're just not being told the whole truth about that. Nobody wants that to come out.
Now, your book, Stephen, it's called The Bass Player.
Yeah.
Because I suppose just before we started recording this, I said to you, like, it's robbed you many things, but, it's robbed you maybe of your great career as a musician in a way, will always be secondary to what happened to you. And the book, I suppose, describes, like, in part, it's a psychological study, really, is it, of trauma? I mean, because... we hear the word trauma, don't we, all the time? And even my kids say it, I'm traumatized, by having to do homework or whatever they find traumatic. Yeah. But that's just the way people throw these terms around. Yeah. What is the effect? And I know, again, that's a huge question. Like, what is trauma? Like, how has it affected your life, I suppose?
Changed it utterly, completely, totally. I mean... I went to a gig in Banbridge. I was a bass player. I was headhunted by some of the best bands. Louis Walsh tried to get me to. Before I joined in Miami, Louis was managing a band called Chips. I was talking to Louis last night, I didn't turn up for the audition. I was in demand. The criteria for me was that, I want to join a band with the most experienced guys. I don't care whether it's popular or not. I just want to be with these fellas so to learn.
Yeah.
That to me was bigger. I never liked the whole pop thing, the whole image thing. I never liked, that the screaming fans never appealed to me. In fact, I thought it was a distraction. All I wanted to do was become a better bass player every single day. So I was headhunted for that. Everybody... everybody, wanted you, will you, we've got a gig coming up, or we're doing a record or something. Will you play on it? And I've played on countless people's records, over the years, but they don't want me on stage with them because, how can you go out for a night's entertainment, you yourself, your wife, your girlfriend, or whatever, and you're looking up at the band and they're playing all this happy stuff and you're dancing. There's one guy on the stage that reminds you of one of the worst, awful horror and all that. So the band leaders are well aware of that. The management are well aware of that. So you're not going to get a gig. So say, for instance, God forbid that I wrote a song and it won the Eurovision.
Yeah.
No, well, that'd be nice, but the headline wouldn't be, Stephen Travers, a bass player from living in Cork, has won the Eurovision. It would be Miami Showband Massacre Survivor wins that. So people say, oh, you think, is it a stigma? I said, no, it's a stigmata. It's like we've got the wounds of Christ, actually the hammers and nails in front of us, because every time people see us, I'll be stopped on I walk down a Con Street to sign some books now before I go home, and somebody will want a selfie. But it's not like, if you're a pop star and everybody's saying, oh, a great gig last night. Mm-hmm. It's because you've become the token tragedy in this wonderful Showband saga, that started. Yeah. That's who we are.
Yeah.
So in every great story, whether it's Gone with the Wind or the Titanic or whatever it is, all of these great things, there is this tragedy, and it's necessary for the arc of a film or a book or whatever. So what I've done is I've tried to turn this into something good, so is that when people mention that, I say, oh yeah, but look what it's done. It's saved lives, Yeah. Look what it's done. It's given acknowledgement. So whatever happened to us is now worth it to do that, But it's not a pleasant cross to carry, to be honest with you.
No.
I'm not moaning about it, because I am alive. But it's not.
It's not something you would have chosen, or anybody would choose, I suppose.
No. But you ask me, it's called the bass player because the one thing that joins the two lives, Alexandra Orton, the producer of the Netflix documentary, she said this person has two lives. One ended on 31st of July 75, and the other, and these are two different people, because even the psychiatric report, which came up with enduring personality change.
Yeah, because this is actually, I'd never heard that now, it's an actual diagnosis where...
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not a descriptive term, it's an actual medical diagnosis. And what does it mean, like?
Well, I asked when I first heard of that, and that was given to me as a part of a report, because I had to undergo psychiatric report for the court case, and then the court case had happened. Went on for so long that it had to be reassessed to see what had changed since 2011 and up until 2021, when the case was under duress was settled, and. So the first time I heard that, I questioned it. I asked the psychiatrist, what does that mean, enduring personality change? And she said, you go into a situation as one person, and the trauma is so great, or the impact is so great, that you become a completely different person. She said, for instance, if you're a businessman or a worker or whatever it is, and you're living in Warsaw or whatever, and the Germans come in and they decide they're going to take out all the Jewish people, put them in concentration camps, and they come out of that concentration camp completely, totally different person. That's easy to understand. So I said, but in our case, I said, our incident lasted sort of 15, 20 minutes. So how can that be? She said, your incident did not last 15. She said, it lasted 50 years.
Yeah.
So, we're inclined to think this thing happened, this is a night, but it's what happened afterwards, and that's what Ali Orton said to me about the book. And she's a smart lady, as I say, she's the producer of the Netflix documentary, and she said, we know what happened. Now I want to know, in this new book, The Bass Player, how did it affect you?
And so another term that gets thrown around, Stephen, is these terms like triggered, and the idea of triggered is, I suppose, that you relive something.
Yeah.
It's used so flippantly. But that is the definition of trauma, isn't it? The proper definition that you continue to relive that moment.
Well, no, that's what you've just said is pretty complex.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why, because what you're suggesting there is you're fine until you're triggered.
Yes.
But you're not fine until you're triggered.
No.
Because it's constantly there.
Yeah.
You know, people talk about flashbacks. I don't have flashbacks. It's there constantly.
Yeah.
And when I was asked to explain that, I say, you can imagine you're in a TV studio and all of the monitors, you know, the producer's there, he's doing his mix or whatever, he's telling the cameras move closer, camera 3, move closer. And he's watching what the cameras are all doing. So to me, there's a screen there, and it's what we call a normal life.
Yeah.
You know, reality.
Yeah.
Now that's open to discussion as well. But yeah, so let's say this is reality, you know, and so they're focusing. But for me, there is another constant monitor there, and I can see it and it is the awful things that were going on at the time. But it's not shut off. I tried to focus with chronic PTSD and intrusive recollections. These are proper terms, as you say. So, but sometimes I am drawn to this thing that's happening there, and that's when the problem starts, because you are now no longer able to cope with the reality one.
Yeah.
So you're drawn to that. But it's not as if somebody shuts off the monitor. It's there all the time. You have this added, obligation now to focus as hard as you can on this monitor, which is showing you real life. You know, you've got to, at 6 o'clock, you got to go home from dinner or whatever, you know. These are the realities. But for people with chronic PTSD and that, you can imagine that this thing is there all the time, and that's what they're trying to cope with.
Yes. And of course, people have, when they talk about trauma, they have very sort of simple solutions, I suppose. And that's not to dismiss, so you can watch a video on Instagram and say, well, if you've had a trauma, then you take up a meditation, for example.
Yoga.
Yeah, yoga. Okay. And I mean, God knows,
good.
Meditation is a great thing, so it's not knocking that. But people have that kind of belief that it's just going to, if you do a certain 5 things, that it'll depart. Yeah. But that isn't really the way it works, is it?
No. Look, I had the privilege of engaging with a fabulous psychologist, and I speak about her in the book. She didn't cure me of these things. She didn't reverse any of these things. No. But she helped me to cope with them.
Yeah.
And that, that was a huge leap forward, because not only does it, have you got these things that help you to cope with them, but the main thing in coping is, first of all, acknowledgement, because for living so long in denial, that's a problem, because you're not helping yourself at all. You're actually suppressing things. But the thing about coping is that that if you actually do these things and you try to cope, understanding them, and so you asked earlier on, you now are knowledgeable about these things. Well, I am, but one of the big things in the bass player for me in the book is that I right throughout the book, I've peppered the book with some of the great adventures I've had as a musician, people that I played with and all of this type of thing, and wonderful experiences, and so musicians find it fascinating. But the reason I do that is so that to counteract what you said earlier on, in case people think, well, he's talking about, the complexities of a 9.5-year court case against one of the most powerful nations on earth. He's also talking about psychology. He's also talking about, historical events and putting things into context and that type of thing. So it's easy for somebody to think, he's a bit of an expert, this fella. But I talk about being a bass player and playing, and the hard grind and the fun of it.
That's your real expertise.
Well, what it is telling them, the person that you're listening to here in this book is an ordinary person like you.
Yeah.
This is not an expert. This is just somebody who found that it was necessary to understand or to acknowledge, because self-acknowledgement is really, really important. This is some fella here that's, he's struggling through this thing, trying to help, and that's why I've become knowledgeable about certain things. But my friend Yvonne Watterson, who's, we did some work together at the beginning of the thing, she said to me, under no circumstances allow the reader to forget that you're a musician.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, they'll begin to think you're an expert.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm an expert at is, to a certain extent, is my own case.
Yeah, and of course and everybody is different. But being an expert on your own case is what you've had to be, really, to survive it.
And I'm sorry, I'm an expert.
Yeah.
I wish to God that I was here talking about, I did a gig with Dire Straits last night,
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I was just in love with the bass. And at 18, I honestly thought, that I'm going to go to London now, centre of the world for music at the time, 1969. And the minute the Beatles hear me, they're going to put Paul McCartney on rhythm guitar and they're going to give me the gig on bass. This is, you're 18 going on 8, you believe this is what drives you, and the excitement, and you're going to be part of this. I was part of it to a certain extent. I was part of working with some, as I say in the book, working with some of the amazing people. Some of my great heroes. My favorite album was The Rock Machine Turns You On, which introduced me to some of the greatest bands of the era. People like Electric Flag and Mike Bloomfield and all of these people. Taj Mahal, he does. I think it's Statesboro Blues on that. I actually played with Taj Mahal later on. So the excitement and thinking about these things, these are the things that I would rather be talking. Sure, you probably see that when I mentioned Taj Mahal, I started smiling,
Yeah.
So this is what I wish, but I can't sit here feeling sorry for myself, because I've been dealing now, talking and engaging with people, and they're suffering so much worse than me. And as I say, every night I'm looking at children's bodies being blown to pieces. How can I possibly complain?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an incredible dichotomy, I suppose, isn't it, between the happiness of music, which is why people love music, and that terrible tragedy. And I suppose, hopefully, that book allows you to tell both sides of that yourself, I suppose.
Well, the book actually questions the reader.
Yeah.
The book is not written just so that I can question myself.
Yeah.
The book questions the reader, and first of all, with Truth and Reconciliation platform, what I've done, and what people like Eugene Reevy, Joe Campbell, people like that, the group of us that we were working through this all the time. At the time, we had government funding. And what we're trying to do is to turn each of these terrible events, the murder of Joe's father, the murder of Eugene's 3 brothers in White Cross, we're trying to get these events to do good.
Yeah.
So as that we can counterbalance, the evil that was done. And that gives you a sense of fulfillment. And, I'm sorry we called it a Truth and Reconciliation platform, because I don't believe in the reconciliation that's understood today, because, so often you've got governments and they'll say, we're working towards reconciliation, so we're going to build a bridge. It's going to cost us 60 million. And when it's done, we'll have, doves and flying over it and olive branches growing out of it and all that. And when it's done, we'll have a wonderful day, and we're going to get the 2 factions, nationalists, unionists, whatever. And it wasn't about just now. We're going to get them, and they're all going to come in the middle of it, in the middle of this peace bridge, and hug each other.
Yeah.
That's not reconciliation.
Yeah, well, they're always seeking to put that full stop at the end of it, really, aren't they?
That's what and that means nothing.
No.
So what they need to do is acknowledgement, and they need to get what Seamus Mallon said. He said, Truth and Reconciliation platform is the greatest thing I've seen for many years, for one reason. One reason it was that we gave a platform for people to get acknowledgement, that people who had never spoken before, never spoken in public, could stand up at a podium at a lectern and say, this happened to me.
Yeah.
And for somebody to come up, and the people who are listening come up and say, I feel your pain, or that's terrible, or that's a terrible thing. Do you know that kind of acknowledgement can change lives?
Yeah.
So forget your peace bridges, listen to the voice of the victim.
Yeah.
The voices of these victims, like Kate Carroll that I mentioned in the book, Rosemary Campbell, people like that. The voice of the victim is the greatest antidote to radicalization. It's the greatest deterrent to violence. You listen to what happened and how, as Ali Orton said, how did it impact your life?
And of course, people can connect with that.
Yeah.
It's been a brilliant talking to you, Stephen. And, it's been a privilege to listen to you and to be able to explore these things in great depth, because I've heard the story so many times and I've actually edited so many articles. But I was delighted that we did do one story focusing on the music career as well in recent times, and it's I feel happy that we did that. So
I'm happy. Look, the book isn't all doom and gloom. There's some lovely things in there.
Yeah,
and I hope when the reader finishes the book, that says, how would I have dealt with this?
Yeah,
that's the question the book poses.
Thanks very much, Stephen, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.